everyone, I'm Celine from Blue Calla Patterns. In this video, we're going to be doing the assembly of our Strawflower Convertible bag. We're going to start by sewing the gusset zipper pocket panels. So there's two of them and they are identical. And then once we've sewn both of these, we're going to sew them together along the bottom, and then we're going to install the firm interfacing and our purse feet. So to do this, we're going to gather all of the pieces that we're going to need for this. So first you're going to need your gusset zipper top, the two contrast pieces. Then you're going to need your gusset zipper bottom. Again, you need the two contrast pieces. Then you're going to need two of the 3/8" zipper tape pieces that you have, so only two of them. Two out of the three gusset zipper pocket lining pieces. So you only need two because we're only sewing two zipper pockets. The gusset firm interfacing piece, your purse feet, and also you're going to need the gusset pattern piece. We're just going to use it as a template to trim our assembled gussets when we are done installing the zipper pocket. So just set this aside for now. We don't need them until the very end. And because we are going to be sewing two of these that are identical, I'm going to separate all of these pieces into two piles. And each one is going to be used for the two separate pockets. Okay, so I'm going to sew one set of pieces together, and then you can pause the video and you can sew up the second piece on your own. All of the steps are going to be 100% identical for both. So I'm not going to show you how to sew both of them individually on the video. I'm just going to do one set, then you can pause and you can do the second set on your own. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the zipper and we're going to place it along the top edge of the gusset zipper pocket piece. And it's personal preference, but I like to have my pull opening on the right, because then when it's finally assembled, it will open left to right. So whichever way it opens currently, it will open and close the opposite method, the opposite way when you're done sewing the zipper pocket. So I'm just going to clip the zipper in place, and then I'm going to do a quick basting stitch along the very top here with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm just basting it because I don't want it to shift when I'm sewing the other piece to the zipper. Okay, so the zipper is basted to this lining piece. Now we're going to take the gusset zipper bottom piece and you're going to flip it so that you're looking at the wrong side. So this is the right side, this is the wrong side. And you're going to center it. So what I'm going to do is now I want this to be perfectly centered, so I'm going to fold this in half and I'm going to make okay, I made a mark here at the center of my zipper. Well, it's more the center of the gusset zipper pocket piece. Then I'm going to fold this in half. Now, when I'm attaching in this step, you'll see that the bottom edge is slightly wider than the top edge. So when I do this mark, I want to make sure that I'm doing it along the narrower top edge. And I'm making that center mark on the wrong side. So then I start by lining up those center marks and clipping them together, and then clipping the rest. So now I'm going to sew through all 3 layers, and I'm going to use a seam allowance of 1/4 inch, and I'm going to make sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. Now when I get to my zipper pull, I stop and I move my zipper pull out of the way, and then I keep going. Okay, so all of the 3 layers are sewn together, and I'm going to flip the contrast so that it is wrong sides together with this lining piece. Now, because I used vinyl here, unfortunately, I cannot press. So I know some have a seam roller. I don't do that. I just kind of finger press and top stitch as I go. However, I did use fabric here for the lining, so I can press this one a little bit. Okay. So I just pressed from the lining side only. So now I'm going to go ahead and top stitch this seam allowance. I use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And what I like to do is just gently, because I wasn't able to press the full leather, obviously, just going to tug it gently as I'm top stitching. So that's what that should look like now. So now we're going to flip this over, and you're going to bring this up. So you're folding it so that it is right sides together. This piece stays facing down as it is. And you can use the edges here to make sure that you're doing this nice and straight. And then I'm just going to use some clips to hold this together. And then again, I'm just going to do a quick basting stitch here along that top edge with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, this is what it looks like from the wrong side, from the right side. And if you like, you can just give this a little press. Okay, so now once again, I want a center mark at the top here. So I'm going to fold this in half and make a mark at the top. And then this time on the gusset zipper top. So again, one edge is slightly narrower. So this one is wider than, sorry, see this way a little bit better. So this one is narrower than this edge. So I know that this is the top. But I'm attaching the bottom to the zipper. So I'm going to fold this like this. And I'm going to make that center mark here on the wrong side, like this. And then I'm going to move this because I don't need it. Now we're going to place this. So I want it to end up like this. So I'm pinning this with this piece upside down. Center marks aligned first. And then clip here and clip here. And then I'm going to sew all of these layers together with 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so that is sewn together. You're just going to flip this up, And again, because I'm using faux leather, I actually cannot press this away from the zipper. If you're using fabric, you can press all of these seams, but because I'm using faux leather, I can't. I'm going to finger press and give a little tug as I'm top stitching. Okay, so that's what I have so far. Now, before I do a trim, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tack down the edges of that zipper pocket lining piece. Sorry, it's called the gusset zipper pocket, but I'm going to just baste here along the edges, and that'll hold the pocket lining piece in place. So now I can use the edges here and just trim everything a little bit. You don't have to necessarily trim the zipper, but I do anyways, like this. And now whenever you cut zipper tape, you should always heat seal it. So I'm just sealing the edges here so that it doesn't fray, especially as you're using the bag. You don't want your zipper to start coming apart at the ends. So just applying a little bit of heat from a flame will seal the ends. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to need the gusset piece now, the pattern piece, to trim this down. Make sure that it is exactly the same size as this pattern piece. And I'm going to use my ruler because I want a really nice straight edge. Okay, so I start by lining up the top edges because the trimming has to occur along the bottom. I don't want you to trim at the top because it's a very specific width and you need that to match up with your zipper panel width. So only trim at the bottom, okay? Now the amount you have to trim is going to vary depending on how precise you were with your seam allowance when you're attaching to the zipper here. So that's the reason why I gave a little bit of extra length, because not everyone is going to be 100% precise with those seam allowances. And so trimming just it's just a little bit more forgiving. So now this is one half of the gusset finished. We're going to repeat exactly the same steps with that second set of pieces. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sew this set together off camera, and then we're going to finish assembling our exterior gusset. Okay, so both gusset zipper pockets are finished and should look like this. Okay, and they do look identical. So this is the bottom edge. We're going to sew these together. So you're going to place them right side together and then clip them together. And then I'm going to sew them together with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is the default seam allowance throughout the entire pattern, except for when we are sewing to a zipper. Usually that's 1/4 inch seam allowance. And when I'm sewing, I'm going to make sure that I backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, when these are sewn together, you'll open it up, and then you're also going to open up the seam allowance, and we're going to top stitch these down. Now, there's two options here. You can open it like this and top stitch on both sides, or if you're more comfortable, and I know this is a preference for some, you can fold it over to one side and top stitch, but I like to, if I do this, I like to top stitch on the other side anyways, just because on this side I like to see a line of top stitching on both sides of the seam. That's just a personal preference, but you can do whatever you prefer. Now, if you've used fabric, unlike me, I've used faux leather, so again, I can't press the seam open or to the side. But if you used fabric, I would recommend that you press it either open or to one side and then do your top stitching. So that is the assembled gusset. Flip it so that it is wrong side facing up. Now this seam at the center, that is the middle of your gusset. And now you're going to need your gusset firm interfacing piece. Now I know that my gusset firm interfacing piece is 9 inches. So I want to mark the center on both of the longer sides. And I know that half of 9 is 4.5. Okay, so I made a mark, top and bottom, 4.5 inches from either corner here. And we're going to glue this to the gusset on the wrong side. And there should be 1/2 inch of space here and here because I don't want this to be sewn into the seam later on when we're attaching our gusset to our main body pieces. Now, I'm not going to measure that exactly. I'm just going to use my ruler as I'm placing it to make sure that I'm leaving 1/2 inch here and here. Now, depending on if you're using a faux leather, depending on what brand it is, you don't want to be putting big globs of glue because some faux leather, it will actually lift the finish on the top or the glue will show on the right side. I've learned that the hard way. So you'll want to just make sure you're doing very thin layer of glue everywhere. No big globs anywhere. Like this. And then I'm lining up those center marks, top and bottom, with that center seam in my gusset. Now before I press down, I'll just make sure I'm leaving that 1/2 inch of space. Yeah. Now it's important that this is glued centered because now we're going to measure to install our purse feet. So I would recommend before we do that you just put something heavy on here and just give it time to dry and then we'll install the purse feet. Okay, so now we're going to make the marks to install our purse feet. So I install mine 3 inches from the center seam and then 1.5 inches up from this outer edge. Okay, so you're going to make 4 of those marks. And then you're going to use a hole punch, or I have a rotary hole punch, but you can use an awl or whatever it is that you have on hand to make holes. Now, if you're doing this in fabric, so if you used fabric, you should apply a drop of fray check in each hole that you punch. Now, because I'm using a non-fraying fabric, I don't have to worry about that. And then I'm going to need my purse feet. Now, this comes in a pack of 6, but you only need 4, obviously. So 4 feet, and then you should have a washer for each one. Like this. You can insert each one. Now, to secure your purse feet, If you feel more comfortable, you can actually add a little drop of glue to keep them in place. It's up to you. I don't usually glue them. Okay, and then I just open up the prongs, insert my washer, and then spread those prongs to secure them in place. Now, especially if you're using a cotton fabric for your lining, you'll want to cover up all these metal parts so that they don't cause your bag lining to fray. So usually I would put duct tape, but I am all out of duct tape, so I'm just going to be putting regular tape on these. So make sure that you cover all of the metal with some kind of tape. You can also, if you have a lot of scraps of fusible woven interfacing, those also make great covers for the metal pieces. And there you have it, your assembled gusset and your beautiful purse feet. Now the last part of the exterior assembly of our bag is to sew and attach our handles to the gusset. So you're going to take both of your handle pieces, and on the wrong side we're going to draw some lines down the center. I'm going to use a permanent pen, not a fabric pen. So because these are 4 inches, we want to draw a line down the center, and so that's going to be 2 inches from each longer edge. Hopefully, yeah, you can see those lines. So I'm going to show you how to sew and attach one, and then you're going to pause the video and you're going to repeat that on your own for the second handle. So I'll just set one aside. You're going to need your double-sided tape. So I'm using 1/2 inch wide double-sided tape. If you only have 1/4 inch wide, that's fine. It's going to work great. I make sure when I use double-sided tape that I will not put it where I'm going to be sewing. Now, some double-sided tapes are fine with being sewn through, but I don't like risking gumming up my needle, so I always place mine where I'm not going to be sewing. So I leave about 1/4 inch space from that center line and lay down my tape, and I also stay away from the far ends because I'm going to be sewing through those ends when I'm attaching it to the gusset, and also when I'm doing my final sewing of the seam. So it's personal preference. I don't like to risk gumming up my needle because then you might get some skip stitches. And that's pretty much the most frustrating thing, especially when you're sewing with faux leather, because the holes are forever. Okay, so I'm putting a strip of this double-sided tape on both sides, and then I'm going to peel the backing off, and hopefully on the video you can see that tape there. And then I'm going to fold this. Now, I don't put this edge right at the line. I put it on the outside of the line. Because if you put these two edges so that they are touching, it can kind of make it oddly bulky there at the center. So I don't do that. So I leave the width of that line that I drew of space. Then same thing for the second half. Whoops. Fold that in like so. Okay. So you'll see there's that tiny bit of gap here where that center line is. Then you're going to need a bunch of clips, and you're going to fold this in half and use a clip to hold them in place. Now it should fold in half pretty easily. And then we're going to go over to the machine and we're just going to sew all along the outer edge. I do it all in one giant rectangular box of stitching. And you're going to use 1/8 of an inch all the way around. Okay, so that is one handle sewn up. Now you're going to take your gusset again, and it doesn't matter which end because you're going to attach a handle to both of the ends. And you're going to, again, I'm going to use my permanent pen because I think my washable pen is going to come off too easily on my faux leather. So now I'm going to make a mark along this top edge, 3/4 in from each of the top corners. Wow, my lines have disappeared on my ruler. This one's not bad. So 3/4 inches. Like this. And then you're going to take that handle that you've just sewn and you're going to place it. So there is the folded edge and then the edge where you have kind of the seam, for lack of a better word. I'm not sure what I would call it. I like to put this on the inside of my handle. Now make sure that your handle is not twisted. And I leave about 1/4 inch of it sticking up past the top edge here. So use some clips to hold that in place. If you are doing the shoulder strap with hardware, at this stage, before you attach this handle, you need to add your O-ring to the handle. Okay, so you would go ahead and you would sew up your handle and then you would just slip the O-ring. So in this case here, so I would have an O-ring attached to the handle. So that's really important if you're going to be doing the removable strap with hardware, that in this step you need to add your O-ring to each handle. So there's going to be one O-ring on each one, and you want to do that before you baste the handle in place to the end of the gusset here. Now, sometimes when you're sewing over a thick handle like this, the pressure of the presser foot can sometimes move the placement of your handle. I don't want that to happen. So what I usually do is I start kind of in the middle here and needle down, and then I back up right away. And then that just makes sure that the placement of my handle doesn't change. Okay, and I do the same thing for the second one. I start kind of in the middle or a little bit in. So that's it for the exterior assembly. And next we're going to start the lining assembly, which has a little bit more work to do because we are going to be sewing the zipper pocket and the double slip pocket to the lining pieces before we do our final assembly.